This is the Chewing the Cud podcast, a podcast for the UK dairy industry, brought to you from the southwest of England and listened to around the world. Hello and welcome to Chewing the Cud podcast, and with me as usual is
Sarah Bolt.
How you doing, Sarah?
I'm really well, thank you, Andrew. How are things with you?
Stop lying to everybody. You're knackered, aren't you?
I'm absolutely shattered.
I should say to people listening, yesterday, Sarah and I hosted the podcast live event that has been planned for a little while, and we both finished it yesterday going, we are absolutely exhausted.
It was great fun.
Yep.
But very, very tiring.
Yeah, you just don't realise it, that having to concentrate like that for 4 hours, okay, it was 2 lots of 2, but concentrate like that for 4 hours, and even in between you didn't really get a break, talking to all our guests and everything, which was wonderful, don't get me wrong. But it was just, yeah, it was afterwards we sat down, didn't we, as we were basically doing a debrief as we'd finished packing everything away, and we just went, oh. And I think we're both feeling it today as well.
I think so.
Anyway, moving on, today's topic. It's an interesting one. I think I mentioned it in the podcast, to be honest with you, but I guess I decided to follow up on this because the name Bokashi just kept coming past, or the word Bokashi kept coming past my desk. I'd have different conversations with different people on different things, and the word Bokashi kept coming up. And it was simply, let's go see what it is. Yeah, exactly. Let's go see what it is. So, it was great. Our guest came and spoke to us about it. I think it's a really interesting topic, actually. It opened my eyes. It was something I knew nothing about, really. And it definitely opened my eyes to explain what it is.
It is, and I think it's one of those products that supports sustainability. And I know sustainability is one of those words that's really overused, isn't it? But I guess, its purpose is to retain nutrients and enhance soil biology, which, both great for the environment, but more importantly, great for the farmer's bottom line. Oh,
definitely. I mean, for argument's sake, as it's explained to us, the process increases the nitrogen, or retains, I think is a better word, as you said, retains more nitrogen. Well, surely that's got to be a good thing. Potentially less fertiliser, as you say, then potentially more organic. It's all organic matter, therefore it's got to be better for our soils.
Definitely.
So let's go take a listen. This podcast has been brought to you today by Chewing the Cud Limited, who offer completely independent dairy and beef nutrition, cow signals advice and training, along with ROMS mobility scoring. For more details on these and other services available, please visit our website www.chewingthecud.com or email us directly on nutrition@chewingthecud.com. Chewing the Cud Limited now offers first aid training from a registered first aid at work trainer and experienced minor injuries practitioner. For more details, please visit our website www.chewingthecud.com or email us directly on training@chewingthecud.com. Hello, I'm Andrew Jones.
And I'm Sarah Bolt.
And welcome to the Chewing the Cud podcast, a podcast for the UK dairy industry.
Farmer, advisor, processor, and everyone else. We have topics and episodes that will interest you.
We discuss the practical and the technical aspects of different UK dairy industry topics.
We aim to make you think about what you're doing and ask yourself, can it be done differently?
Listen to us speak with specialists from inside and outside the industry about their area of expertise.
Subscribe and listen to episodes for free on your favourite podcast platform.
Sign up to our website, www.chewingthecud.com, for podcast notifications so you never miss an episode.
And links to our socials, including Instagram, Chewing the Cud Podcast, all one word, and remember, no G.
Or email us direct on podcast@chewingthecud.com.
If you like what we do, please share and leave us a review to show your support. And that's it. Enjoy today's episode.
Hello Hello and welcome back to Tune the Curd podcast. And today our guest is Andrew Sincock. Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
How are you?
I'm very well. I'm rested.
You're rested?
10 days in Brittany.
Oh, very nice.
Came back last night across the ferry. Slept most of it, which was delightful. It's a great way to travel. Forget flying. Go with the ferry every time. So yeah, feeling good.
Good. So today we should say Andrew is the business owner of Agriton, and I believe there's a few other little feathers to your bow you wanted to tell us about, but we'll do that in a minute. So we're here basically today to talk about Bokashi. I believe I've said that right. It's a word that just keeps coming up in front of me all the time, and it's like, well, actually, let's go talk to a man who knows about this. But before we do, Andrew, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are today.
Very good question. How long have we got?
Well, usually about an hour, but I prefer you only be a couple of minutes.
Yeah, no. So, in a nutshell, grew up on my grandparents' mixed dairy beef arable farm in Cornwall. As a child, wanted absolutely nothing to do with agriculture or farming in general. I was sort of allergic to hard work, I think. I always remember a quote from one of the old US presidents that something along the lines of hard work never killed anybody, but I don't want to take the risk. So I think I adopted that sort of principle as a child. Didn't make it as a footballer, which was my passion. So farming was the only thing I knew. So started working properly really on farms maybe at about 21, 22, and haven't left. Loved it. Got my first job as an assistant herdsman and have pretty much done everything you can imagine. Sheep, pigs, chickens, tractors, arable, dairy, you name it. Worked right up until, I think it's about 7 years ago when I joined Agriton. And basically, I always say, and it's cliched, and for anybody that's heard it before, I apologise, I sort of swapped the 5 till 9 for a 9 till 5, ultimately, is what I'd done. I was single and miserable and had no life or friends. So wanted to just take life a little bit easier and thought actually that I would become a dairy farm consultant. So my last job was working for the Wills brothers down in Cornwall.
Oh, yeah.
And loved it. And if I went back to farming, although I know they're going through a few changes at the moment, would love to work with Robert Wills again. I thought he was exceptional, probably the best herdsman that I've had the pleasure of working with, and some amazing cows. And joined Agriton as a sort of technical ruminant specialist, I think was the title. The current owner of Agriton then was looking to retire, so it was always in the plan to slowly take over, assuming they liked me, I liked them, it was a good fit. It was, and fast forward a few years, I've now the majority shareholder of both Agriton and their sister company Agrivital, which is foliar fertilisers, as well as a small Acer palmatum nursery called Bud Lake Nursery, all based out of Devon, just between Tiverton and Taunton. So that's the day job. It's the owner and director of Agriton Agrivital. And I've also recently taken on a farm tenancy. So I've taken on 100 acres of arable land in Monmouthshire, which I am sort of share farming with a friend of mine called Dan Smith. And just harvested our first harvest here, I don't know, probably four weeks ago, maybe 3-4 weeks ago. And I'm growing, this year grew 100 acres of spring wheat for wild farmed.
Okay.
Fantastic.
That's the Andy Cato.
That's the Andy Cato, yes.
Who I believe you met recently.
Sorry, just a little plug there. Yeah, I was very lucky. I was lucky enough to go to RAU's graduation where he was given his honorary doctorate. So
so wild farmed grower, and we'll be growing for them again next year, which a lot of people say, oh, what's it like? So the fact that I'm growing for them again next year probably tells everybody everything they need to know. I'm actually doing a little bit less myself this year, but I'm farming with a not neighbour, but a farmer quite close by. So the two of us are farming and growing for Wild Farm this year.
So, but that's what made you go Monmouthshire? Just the opportunity?
The wife.
Okay.
Say no more.
Yeah. Okay, I was just going to say, because the business is in Devon, and if you're saying that's up in Monmouthshire,
so I'm Cornish originally, so love Cornwall, that will forever be home. And got a job in we're literally on the Devon-Somerset border, to be honest with you. It might as well be Somerset. And because the job went well, I thought I'd move. So I moved up to Wellington, Somerset. Couldn't possibly live in Devon, being Cornish. That friction runs deep. So moved to Wellington, and my wife was living in Bristol at the time, and she was originally from Lydney. So when we were looking for a house, we thought, well, somewhere in the middle. Well, somewhere in the middle was the Somerset levels, which floods. So that's not. So it's either closer to me or closer to her. And given that I travel a lot for work, it made more sense for me to move further into the country rather than for her to move out. So it was Bristol-ish area, and nobody wants to live in Wales for some silly reason. So it seems to be a little bit cheaper. So we found a really nice house, which we're really happy with. It's close to her family, so works really well.
So, Bokashi.
Yes.
Start at the beginning.
Yeah.
What is it?
Yes, because it just keeps coming across my name. Look, we're all talking about regenerative farming more, and look, let's be honest. Cynical's maybe not the right word. I believe there's a place for it. I just feel it's a little bit too Wild West at the moment and I even heard someone come back from Groundswell and say that very comment that people are now just telling you things without backing them up. And to me, I'm somebody that needs the backup, the
bit
proof.
Of science.
Yes, to show what it is.
Yeah.
But this is one thing that does keep coming up as something that should. So I may be a little bit, I want to hear the facts, and that's why you're here, because if I want to hear it, I'm sure there's other people out there and I'm like, well, what's Bokashi? What is it?
So it was probably one of the, when I looked at joining Agriton, I looked at the product portfolio, as you would.
As you do,
and this was one that I'd not heard of, didn't know of, and having come from a dairy farm management position, it was something that I saw and instantly thought, hang on a minute, that just makes perfect sense. Why don't I know about it? Was my initial thoughts.
Yep.
So, okay, fine. So went away and worked with Agriton and a guy called Jan Viersma Hoekstra, who's the owner of Agriton Netherlands and sort of the brains behind everything Agriton. He told me what it was, great, and he sold it to me as if I was a farmer and he was selling it to me. And I thought, okay, that's hugely expensive, and massively labor intensive as well.
I say, because whether it's relevant or not, but I understand biodynamics a little bit as well, because one of my neighbours in North Queensland was into his biodynamics, and trying to explain that to people, I kind of go, it's like organic plus, but it's all obviously more than that, because it cycles the moon and everything else as well, and it's burying things in cow horn and whatever. But I suppose I'm sort of going,
So it was, I got the idea of it, and okay, this is how I would explain it to anybody. And predominantly you're talking to livestock farmers because they're the ones with organic manures.
Yep.
So you're talking to a livestock farmer, which I'm going to assume 99.9% of livestock farmers are making silage.
Yep.
So the initial question would be, well, why do you make silage? Well, we grow an excess of nutrients in the spring and the summer that we then want to feed to our cattle during the winter months when we don't have enough feed and fodder. Fine. So how do you preserve those nutrients from spring, summer to get them to the winter? Well, we bring them into a silage clamp and we ensile. We make silage. You've spoken about silage additives and the art of making silage on your podcast numerous times. I'm not going to go over it again. Same principles apply with organic manures. We produce an excess of organic manures in the winter, and we want to use them predominantly in the spring and the summer months when things are growing, when those nutrients can be used. What is the best way of preserving those nutrients from one period of time to another? Fermentation. Okay. So it's the same principles as silage making as we're taking and adopting with organic manures. What would happen if you took your first cut silage, put it in the corner of a field in a great big heap and left it there, or treated it just like you do with your organic manures?
It composts.
It would heat up.
Yeah.
It would be smelly, stinky. It would shrink.
Yeah.
Would the cows then eat that grass 6 months later? No,
because it's in the air. So it's all to do with air, is it?
It's a lot of it's to do with the aerobic nature of it. So a lot of the losses occurred. And when we talk about losses, we're talking about the oxidization is happening in that aerobic state or in that aerobic environment. So bringing it and putting it into an anaerobic state, into an anaerobic environment, reduces those losses from the research done by WETSUS, which is the European Centre of Excellence for Sustainable Water Technology. Don't ask me how they got WETSUS from that.
Well, I was going to say.
They looked at it and they compared aerobic compost, so turned thermophilic compost.
So you said water, what they were looking at from potential runoffs from it?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
So the leaching, effectively.
Yes, that's the word, yeah.
So they compared traditional compost, they compared anaerobic digestion, and then they compared fermentation. And it was a lactic acid fermentation, which Agriton commercial name, Bokashi.
Yep.
And the thermophilic composting, the total carbon that went into a heap, say it was 100 tons, when they finished the process and they came to take it out again, they reanalyzed it, they had just 25 tons left. So that effectively meant 75% of the total carbon disappeared.
Right.
Nitrogen was 63, I think, off the top of my head.
Yep.
So huge losses.
Yep.
Anaerobic digestion was less. So I think there was about 40% loss from the carbon in anaerobic digestion, which ultimately is taken and captured as methane and used as energy, but it's not in that material at the end.
Yep.
Bokashi lost 1%. So if you're talking about retention of carbon, 1% from Bokashi versus a 75% loss from aerobic compost.
So leaving it in the corner of the field, or
in this situation,
or in
it was being turned,
or in the
actively turned,
right,
which is accelerating those losses even further.
Yeah.
Whereas a farmer that would leave it in the corner field in a heap and probably not turned, you'd probably be looking at losing about 40% as opposed to 75%, just because you're not turning it as much.
But even if we take that 40% loss compared to 1% loss is massive.
Quite significant.
Yeah.
And when we think about carbon, we want it in the soil, and this is where the regen stuff can get a bit carried away. Ultimately, increasing organic matter is nearly always a good thing.
Yes.
So if we can increase soil organic matter by putting more carbon back into our soils, we're going to be better off in the long term, than if we don't. So that was really it in a nutshell. It was a really good, simple way of retaining nutrients that we can then put back onto the soil and use on farm rather than being lost to the atmosphere or through leaching into watercourses and causing pollution with effluent runoff, for example.
Now, you mention carbon, but we don't fertilise with carbon. No. I'm not saying that isn't, that's become part of the whole, as you say, carbon sustainability. But if we talk to somebody who is not in the regen field, they're traditionally going to talk about your NPKs. How is it affecting your other nutrients to make it more effective than the traditional way that manure is handled on a farm?
If I had teed up a question for you guys to ask me, it would probably have been that.
because let's be honest,
it's a great question.
The whole point of this podcast is for people to listen and learn, and that's why I do this podcast myself, is to listen and learn, because I don't know anything about this at all, really. I knew it's fermented, that's all I kind of know. But as I say, there are going to be people that, like myself, may be more cynical than me or want to know that information. This is coming from something completely different than the way we farmed for the last, 100 years then, where, we've been told that you need to add fertilizer, you need to do this. It's a complete sort of change back maybe to some of the old ways, but that's how our mindset is. So, what does it do in terms of the nutrients we're used to thinking about?
Okay, so I love this, and the fact that we're on a sort of livestock-focused podcast makes it perfect. What's the first thing you look at when you get a silage analysis through?
Okay.
Energy and protein.
Energy and protein. Energy first?
And probably much of a muchness.
What's happening in a rumen? Rumen microbes. Fermentation. Rumen microbes.
Glad one of us is on the ball. I always feel I'm going to be asked a trick question here, and I don't want to give the wrong one.
Andrew.
I know, but I was afraid I'm going to trip up.
There's no trick questions. In my mind, what's happening in the rumen is also happening in the soil.
Yes.
And I'll explain that.
Someone else has said to me before as well, actually.
It's the
We
same
were having
thing.
that discussion when we were talking sugars.
That was it. Yeah, Bronwyn.
That's it.
I was going to say it's Bron that's told me that. Yeah.
So rumen microbes breaking down complex organic structures, cellulose, into its constituent parts, volatile fatty acids, to drive yield.
Yep.
What's happening in the soil? Soil microbes are breaking down complex organic structures, generally more lignin-based, into their constituent parts to drive yield. So the same function is happening in the rumen as what's happening in the soil. Yet the way in which we treat them, and as you just said, fertilize them, is completely different. Entirely different. Now that's wrong.
Because, going back to Bron, there's arguments that, you want to be adding sugars to get those microbes.
Absolutely.
To feed the microbes rather than feeding the cow.
100%. So it's the old analogy, we feed the rumen, not the cow, and we should be feeding the soil biology, not the plants. So that's it in a nutshell, but we can expand on that a little bit further. Within carbon, so organic matter will contain roughly 58% carbon. The rest of it is made up of other minerals and nutrients. If you're putting more organic matter onto your fields, ending up into your soil, you will be also applying nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. So just like the carbon retention that we see with the Bokashi process, we're also seeing an increased retention of things like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. So not only have you got more carbon to put on, but you've also got more nitrogen. So if you put on 1 ton of your standard organic manures, RB209 would say that when you take that out of the shed, it's probably got 6 kilos of nitrogen, roughly. By the time it's been sat in the corner of a field for 6 months over the winter until you come to spread it, you might be looking at maybe 3 kilos per ton, possibly-ish.
I should say this is one reason why you should test your
100%
manures,
agree.
because I've definitely seen NRM do a report, and I think it was 6 was your average, but the range was anything from about 2 up to about 35 or something like that. So that 35 is an extreme because it's down at 6, but then obviously there's a massive variation, and you should be testing your manures.
I had a conversation regarding RB209 and its value, and actually said when I gave my presentation in Belfast last year, Nuffield presentation, at the end of it, I said, forget RB209 and analyse. Because of that difference, again, I've seen those ranges, they're huge.
Farmers can save so much money by analysing slurry and manure because...
Well, it's no different than forages. I know I've got a client I still work with, been working for 9-10 years, and when I first saw him, he goes, I don't bother analysing my maize because maize is maize.
Yeah, which it's not.
Which is not. And exactly. And I said, let's analyse it. And it cost him, I don't know, was it 15 quid, 20 quid, whatever it was. And we ended up saving half a kilo cow for the winter for blend. I mean, that just paid for itself without even thinking about it.
And this is, so I said, forget RB209. And I also said at the same time, there should be a fertiliser tax. Because when it was more expensive in 2022, everybody valued every kilo they put on far more than what they did when it was half the price.
I remember writing an article at the time for who I was working for, like all the different ways that you should be trying to make better use of your fertiliser, as you say, in the hope that maybe people would learn that year to then, not necessarily everything, but start implementing some of those things going further forward to be more efficient, etc.
And at King's Hay, that's exactly our tune as well. You've got to measure it to be able to make an informed management decision and save those pounds.
I would say it's probably one of the things, you talk about King's Hay's top 5% or top 20%, they're probably doing that exceptionally well. They're analysing everything. They're looking at things. They're not overfeeding. And I feel that if you're applying your organic manures without having them measured or sort of analysed, you could be over-applying or under-applying. Now, if you're under-applying, you're not going to get the best returns. You're not going to be hitting those high efficiency figures. And if you're over-applying, then you're causing pollution. Now, I live in the River Wye area where the Wye is particularly sensitive. The over-application of organic manures is a genuine problem. So both under-applying and over-applying are issues, which is why you have to analyse.
You're not being as efficient as you should be, are you?
Nope.
Both ways are costing pounds.
Exactly.
It's as simple as that, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's something that people should be doing for the cost of an analysis. And then somebody will say, well, I've got my young stock over there. I've got my rearers over here. I've got, calving over here. I've got lambing pens back there. I've got growers and finishers. I've got 6 different sheds, all with different rations, all with different. Okay, well, I think if you take a sample from each shed, it is still worth doing rather than take an average. And okay, maybe you don't need to take it every year, but maybe every 2 or 3 years, just analyze to make sure, we haven't changed too much. That's what it is. That's what's worth.
Sensible. I mean, because like for instance, you take red tractor, you're supposed to, is it soil sample the whole farm every 3 or 4 years?
5
years.
Farming rules water.
Yeah. 5 years.
So, what's different?
It should be exactly the same. And the information you get is huge. But ultimately, you're going to have more carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium in that Bokashi compared to untreated or standard sort of stacked farmyard manure.
So if we say, would you say 6 is the standard for nitrogen under RB 209, and you said possibly even half that by the time it's spread, what would it be if it's been fermented?
5 to 5.5. So what the trials that we did with Innovative, it was a Dutch company. The name escapes me now. So we commissioned trials. So we paid for an independent company to do some trials. And we actually saw an increase in nitrogen, which is ridiculous. And this is a conversation I had with Yo Valley, Tim Mead, Will Mayer, Tom White, when I had a conversation with them about Bokashi. If you take 100 grams of milk and you look at the calorific value, and then you take 100 grams of Greek yogurt, for example, and look at the calorific value of the Greek yogurt, both 100 grams, the yogurt has more. The difference between the two is fermentation. You've not added anything else. So why is there more calories in yogurt than there is in milk? Well, the fermentation process, those microorganisms are actually unlocking and breaking down some of those complex organic structures. In this instance, some of those proteins.
That you wouldn't otherwise be able to absorb.
Exactly that. So the same thing happens. What would happen if I ate wheat, for example? Not much. It would go straight through me. What if I drank beer or ate bread? I'd put on quite a bit of weight.
It's been processed to allow access, which is the whole point why we roll wheat or roll barley to feed to cattle, because they can't. It would go straight through them anyway. So we've got to break it down for them to get to it.
So the same principles are happening with fermentation. So the fermentation of milk increases the calorific value of that 100 grams of milk. So there is some, and I'm on the fence with this. There's no data to support this, so I say it with that caveat. But the fermentation process makes available nutrients that potentially weren't available before, which is why in that trial we saw an increase in nitrogen. It could just be that the analysis was taken and from a little bit more manure and less straw.
Yes, I mean, my brain's going, you can't magic something from nothing. So actually the volume will have gone down to have made it more effectively concentrate.
So that's what's happening with thermophilic compost.
Right.
Where you're turning, you lose a lot more moisture, you lose a lot more carbon at a higher rate than you lose your nitrogen, for example. So if you analyse a kilo of fresh farmyard manure, there'd be 6 kilos. If you then analyse a kilo of processed, complete, mature compost, you might actually find that there's 8 or 9 kilos of nitrogen in that sample. So it's increased, but actually it's just sort of diluted. The volume has not diluted. The opposite of, what's the opposite of
concentrated?
Concentrated.
Yeah.
It's concentrated because you've diluted the carbon more so. Actually, per kilogram of end compost, you've possibly got more nitrogen. So it's hard to then compare apples with apples because you've lost loads over here, which has concentrated the nutrients, whereas over here it's still fairly dilute, so appears slightly less on an analysis, which becomes really I've complicated things, haven't I?
No, no, it's just thinking about the implications of this.
So I want to ask, so we're talking about a fermentation process. What is triggering this fermentation process?
Great question.
Well, yeah, I guess it ties in. I was there going, well, okay, how do we actually achieve this?
Fine. So
same thing ultimately, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. What we're doing, there's a number of ways of doing it, but the simplest, easiest, best, cheapest way of doing it that farmers have adopted, and probably why you keep hearing it being mentioned, is the application of microbes onto the bedding once a week. So we've cultured, gathered, collected put into a bottle a number of microorganisms. There's about 80 different microbes, yeasts, fungi, actinomyces, now actinobacteria, phototrophic, and lactic acid. Nothing strange, nothing weird, just fairly generic, bog standard microbes that we're...
And are they normally found in our soils? And
Yes.
So there's nothing, you're not adding something that's not
No.
normally found in nature in that situation.
They are all very present and abundant in nature, no question. So we're adding those microbes, and they are what we call facultative anaerobes. Getting a bit technical. Really simply, they can work both aerobically and anaerobically. So think of lactic acid bacteria. It's naturally occurring, naturally present on grass when it's in a field growing. As soon as you bring it into a clamp and you turn it from an aerobic into an anaerobic environment, the way in which that lactic acid bacteria behaves and works changes. Same with the microbes. You're adding the microbes onto the bedding, they start that fermentation process.
So when you say bedding, can it be any kind of bedding? So whether it's straw yards, cubicles?
Cubicles probably less effective. It works best with deep bedded
Right, so so like
housing.
It's not really to go on, say, sawdust on the back of cubicles?
There are people that do that. So
Right.
there's a guy, Mr. Reed, who's a Somerset farmer who featured in the Farmers Weekly a few years ago now. He was applying the same microbes onto the back of the beds, walking through knapsack sprayer, spraying the microbes onto the beds, helping control mastitis, and then starting the fermentation process with the organic manure. Obviously, it ended up in the slurry.
Yep.
And he was treating his slurry by adding the biology that way.
Right.
So it is absolutely possible.
But so we say preferred method then is on deep bedding.
Yeah, that would be, generally speaking, those microbes in that situation would end up in the slurry as opposed to into solid muck. And the two are vastly different.
Yeah.
I know, always have this conversation and I always get drawn on slurry and I always say something I shouldn't. So I'm not going to.
Can I say it for you?
Go on.
Slurry is not a natural product. A cow would not naturally mix urine and dung. So we're dealing with a product that is not natural when we have slurry. Is that the quote?
Absolutely.
So
you've said it far more succinctly than what I would have. My comment would be, and one of the first things that Jan told me when I joined Agriton was if poo and pee were supposed to be mixed together, they'd come out the same hole. Which, of course, they do with chickens. And I had a conversation with somebody, but I've got my cows in a field, 200 milking cows in a paddock, and the poo and pee is being mixed together all the time. I said, hang on a minute, that in itself isn't natural to start with. You know, that doesn't happen in nature. But also when you look at a cow can do a poo while it's walking, but it stops to do a wee. And when it does a wee, it arches its back to the point where if it was in a field, if it was standing still, the poo and the pee wouldn't actually mix. So it is not a natural product at all. Anyway, microbes onto cubicles is an option. But generally speaking, with Bokashi, we're talking about it with deep-bedded cubicles or solid manure. So that could be stable pens, it could be lambing, calving, young stock, you name it. Anything deep-bedded, and that could be straw, wood chip, wood fines, paper waste, any organic matter.
Right, I was going to ask, because it just got to be straw, but it can be any organic matter.
Any organic matter. There are a few principles you need to consider with composting in general that also apply to Bokashi, and that's carbon to nitrogen ratio.
So going back, how are you applying it then weekly in that situation?
Was it with a knapsack sprayer? There's guys that are applying it onto the straw before it goes through a straw chopper and gets blown into the shed.
Right.
Tim Downs, dairy farmer that most people are aware of, has retrofitted a misting system onto his straw blower. So when he turns the straw blower on, I think it's a Teagle straw blower, flicks a switch in the cab, that sprays microbes onto the nozzle. So that's onto the microbes is being blown into the shed.
Right.
Ben Taylor Davis has a misting system built into his shed, so set on an automatic timer. So once a day for 1 minute, these misting systems come on and spray microbes across the animals onto the bedding. And
it's applied as a liquid then, it's not a powder.
Liquid microbes applied neat directly onto the animal bedding before fresh bedding is applied.
Right.
But it only needs to be applied once a week. So work out, and generally I'd say if you apply a ton of straw a day, for example, that's 7 tons a week. You would apply 14 litres of microbes neat into that shed once a week. So part of the routine, if you're walking through the stock, checking them, you could walk through with a knapsack spray on a Monday morning or a Friday lunchtime, spraying it on as you go quite easily. I generally make a joke and say, well, most farmers could do with checking their stock a bit more often and walking through a shed.
You'll get in trouble for that.
Well, I know. It was because I had it drummed into me as a child that standing over a gate and looking at them is not checking them.
No.
So you mentioned carbon to nitrogen ratios. So we pick back up on that.
Yeah, carbon to nitrogen ratio is really important. When it comes to composting, if there's too much carbon, nothing is going to break down. So think about the reason why we use straw for a roof material, for example, thatch. High carbon, lasts a long time, doesn't rot, doesn't break down. You know, a stack of straw in the shed will last 100 years, no problem. If it was high nitrogen, i.e. lawn clippings, everyone can relate to lawn clippings, put that in a heap in the corner of a field or in the shed or in the corner of your garden, they're going to heat up and start rotting really, really quickly. So there's a difference. One is high in nitrogen, one is high in carbon. You need a balance of the two. And that comes back to the balanced diet that we talk about feeding ruminants: carbon, carbohydrates, nitrogen, protein. You need a balance of both, which is roughly 24 to 1 carbon to nitrogen.
I was going to say, from that point of view, is there a diet that you think works better for producing Bokashi?
Probably straight farmyard manure of average consistency. So we're not talking about your calving pens, or we're not talking about the growers that, you know, are in the off farm that you maybe sped up once a month. Somewhere in the middle, just your average FYM is probably the most ideally suited feedstock. But if you want to get creative, you can. So you could add wood chip, for example, and adding wood chip and increasing the carbon to nitrogen ratio will actually promote the fungal populations within that organic matter to dominate because they've got a more preferred food source. If you apply poultry manure, for example, with more nitrogen, you're going to be feeding the bacteria a little bit more than the fungi. So you can manipulate it to suit the microbial populations that you want to promote and then apply onto the fields at a later date.
I'm just picking up. So I'm coming at this from a soil point of view. I understand soil carbon nitrogen ratios, but I hadn't really thought about them within farmyard manure so much, and thinking about actually how you can manipulate that within farmyard manure. So it's exactly the same as to, depending on those ratios, as to whether we're promoting the bacterial growth or the fungal growth in exactly the same way.
Exactly the same way. So it's talking about crop residues. Think about crop residues in the same respect. If you're chopping straw, for example, after an arable crop, you've got high carbon material. When that's being processed within the soil, it's highly likely that the soil organisms are going to be pinching nitrogen from your soils to then break down that high carbon material. So actually a lot of farmers find the following crop after they've chopped straw, there's a nitrogen deficiency through that CN ratio.
And that was why we always used to take the straw away, isn't it? Because we didn't want to use up that nitrogen.
Take it away, add some nitrogen from your livestock, as in cattle manure's urine, and then bring it back with a perfectly balanced CN ratio, which means it's going onto the soil and it can be processed really simply and easily. And you are then increasing the efficiency of that return of nutrients through the soil.
So if you've added this once a week, how long can it sit there?
Great
in
question.
pen?
Yeah. Generally speaking, we're going to say the winter's 6 months. So if your winter housing is 6 months, I would say you really need to muck it out after 3.
So we're aiming 3.
3 months is
because you know some people are like every 6 weeks.
You could push it to 4 months probably.
Yep.
But I wouldn't want to go any longer. If you do muck out every 6 weeks, that's not an issue. The whole process would take 2 months. So from the day you apply microbes to organic manure to the day that material is then ready to apply onto the land would be 2 months.
I'm just trying to think, as a kid, we were loose housed, covered yards, but it wouldn't work for us because we used to clean and bed out everything every day. Yeah. So that it's not going to work in that situation.
So where was it being taken out and put?
in the muck heap.
In the muck heap. So if
it's stored in the muck store for I mean something like the calves might be, but all the others, whether it was heifers, dry cows, milking cows, were scraped and bedded up every day, completely fresh.
So if you were to take it and put it into a midden, for example, dung midden, there's no reason why that couldn't be your Bokashi heap. So every day you're taking it out, you're putting it into the corner of a shed, into a midden, that becomes your Bokashi heap. So you can add it to that material rather than making it in situ.
So it doesn't have to be made in situ, it can be done.
Like I said, in situ is the easiest, cheapest, best way of doing it. Less hassle, less work. But there are other ways of doing it. So you could it works in a straw for muck deal. If you're sending your straw away and you're getting the muck back, every trailer load that comes in, you can treat that.
So, it's flexible then in terms of how it's...
I've not found a farm yet where the system doesn't work or where it can't fit into it. And it might just take a little bit of jiggery-pokery to make that happen, but ultimately you can get it in the one way.
But it's not like it has to be... what's the word? It has to be cleaned out and then you deal with it. You can literally do it in the shed as the cattle are in there. It doesn't have any effect, or livestock are in there, it doesn't have any effect on them. It just starts doing its thing. Thank you very much, and gets on with it.
There are some papers, predominantly from Asia, which is where the microbes in the process sort of originated from, that suggest the inclusion of EM in this instance, which is effective microorganisms, but let's call it beneficial biology as a more general, wider term. Other products are available, obviously. Adding beneficial biology into an environment actually reduces disease pressure. So this is the balance between good and bad microorganisms. And if we can populate an environment, so say it's a lambing pen, for example, an E. coli and watery mouth. If instead of disinfecting, where we think killing 99.9% of bacteria is a good thing, and instead what we do is we just promote that whole environment full of good bacteria, you don't give things like E. coli chance to establish.
It's the same as in the udder, isn't it, with mastitis, that we have those, I can never say the word, commensurate, can't say it. Commensurate bacteria?
Yes.
Is that the right word?
I'm thinking about our podcast with Eric, who basically said this is happening. Why don't you have the bacteria you want in there rather than just leaving it to chance? You're making sure you have the good bacteria, and you're effectively saying the same. This fermentation is happening. Let's have the good bacteria, the beneficial bacteria dominate rather than leaving it to chance as to which ones we have.
It's competitive exclusion is the technical name. So you're out-competing the bad guys by populating the area with good guys. We've done some work with the microbes as a teat dip, and we compared it to iodine, and we saw that it was as effective at preventing mastitis as iodine. No better, no worse, as effective.
I'm guessing what you're saying is iodine's killing everything, good or bad, whereas this is promoting good.
But the thing, and this is how I had it explained to me, is you think about this tabletop. If you clean it with your bleach, 99.9% of bacteria killed. Once that bleach is worn off, if the next microbe that lands there is, for example, E. coli, it effectively has an open breeding ground, has no competition, and can spread really quickly. So cleaning works well. And when I say cleaning, I mean traditional cleaning, disinfecting, works well when you kill everything. If with your lambing pens, you clean the pen, you clean the drinker, you clean the troughs, but forget to clean your wellies, and you walk into that environment and on your welly is some E. coli, it's then got an open breeding ground. So that's and I think for farmers, that's a far easier ask to spray, to apply biology, to ensure that there isn't room for things like mastitis causing bacteria or even worse.
What about oocytes?
Yeah, so
I'm thinking obviously crypto and epoxy, because they're very difficult to kill
or
with
fungal
disinfectant.
infections, yes.
Yep.
Viral or parasites, no.
Okay.
We looked at, so one of the questions we always get asked with Bokashi is weed seeds and worm burden. Weeds, no issue. We have good kill rate with weeds. That's very different. Worms depends on the life cycle. If the egg comes out the back of the animal and sits in the manure, the microbes will eat I call it chitin, but chitosan within the egg shell, some of the microbes will attack and eat that. So it will kill the egg.
Yeah.
But if it comes out the back of the animal living, won't touch it, because microbes won't attack and kill other living things.
And it's all to do with that niche within nature, isn't it? That those microbes and bacteria are sharing that same ecological niche, and therefore they can't then jump into another ecological niche.
No, nature's
so clever.
Awesome.
It's so clever.
Nothing in nature is done by accident, and I think that's what we forget. Nature's got a problem for everything is there for a reason. There isn't an issue as such. It's just an imbalance.
It sounds very much to me, as I say, with a slightly single head, we're at the start of biological farming, really, aren't we? In terms of, rather than using chemicals that we were told this is the answer, we're now going, right, we need to use the natural biology that maybe we would have used in the past but didn't understand the science. But now we're starting to understand the science. We're then using that to benefit us in a way that we wouldn't have before.
The one thing I want to say on that is I completely agree, 100% agree. The issue, and this is what I'm finding with groundswell, is the only people that make money from regen, organic, biological farming, using your term, which is a good one, are the farmers, because they don't need products. Farmers are used to turning to a product, traditionally a chemical, whether that's a wormer or a fertiliser, they turn to a product to solve a problem. Whereas now we're talking about biology. Now, we can supply biology in a bottle at a cost, of course, but what farmers need to be aware of is the fact that they can actually go and produce and capture their own biology from their own farm, which doesn't have to cost them a penny to do these things, whether it's Bokashi, whether it's to put it into the slurry, whether it's to... You can create and capture beneficial biology really simply, really easily on your own farm at zero cost. So why aren't more people promoting it? Because nobody makes money from it.
And that's the really big thing, isn't it? I belong to a few sort of regen groups on Facebook, and somebody put something on there about a product and what's the barrier as to why regenerative farmers don't use this product? And I'm like, because it's an amendment. If we're talking proper regen, we shouldn't need to kickstart or add amendments.
Nope. And that's why you don't see love it or hate it, the term, not a big fan personally, but anyway, regenerative farming probably isn't more widely adopted because it carries some stigma, but also because it's not in the front page of the Farmers Weekly or the Farmers Guardian. Because who's going to advertise in the Farmers Weekly if nobody's buying a chemical or a fertiliser? You open the Farmers Weekly, the only person that'd be advertising would be Claydon Drills, probably.
Well, how are you making money out of this then?
We don't make money from Bokashi.
Right.
It doesn't provide us enough of an income. We have other products that we sell. So we do rumen buffers, we do mycotoxin binders, we do bedding powders, we do silage additives. We've obviously got the second company that does foliar fertilizers and placement fertilizers. We've got a number. In isolation, Bokashi as a product, as a microbe that we sell for making Bokashi, wouldn't sustain our business for more than a week.
So in answer to your question as to why don't farmers harness it themselves, is there a risk in trying to harness these things? I'm thinking back to, say, thinking of farmers that in the past I've worked with that maybe yogurtize milk to then feed to their calves over a period of time. When it works well, it works really, really well. When the wheels fall off, we've got bacterial soup growing the wrong bacteria and everything else. So is it a similar issue with trying to get the right bugs to make sure it does the right thing?
Farmers are busy. And some of them are busy fools and some of them are genuinely busy. It takes a bit of time. Is the truth. It takes a bit of time. Now,
that's what I was thinking. When you said, there's no cost, I'm sat there going, there's time.
There's time. Farmers' time, which, let's be honest, farmers don't value. They should, but they don't actually put a monetary value on an hour's time. But that's what it takes. So if you were to Google IMO, which is indigenous microorganisms. So that's IMO, where you can go and you can capture your own microbes from your own environment. It would take you probably 2 weeks to create a brew of your own microorganisms. You can wash rice. So rice contains an awful lot of lactic acid. You can make a lactic acid mix really quickly with some rice.
Was it a bit like, is it sourdough? People keep their starter just going and going. And there's stories of people who've had it for decades or whatever it is, isn't there?
What's the one with the Scoobies that you... The fermented drink that you put, are they called Scooby? What's that called? There is like a...
like kefir or kombucha? Or...
No, I was thinking, I was thinking kefir is the one I'm thinking of.
It's probably the other one, the kombucha.
Kombucha.
Yeah.
So all we'd say is, and this is a common misconception, I'm talking about soil biology and people turning to products. Now, we supply microbes. I'm not hiding that fact. Others are available. The microbes that we supply, the microbes that others supply, aren't necessarily going to survive in your soil for very long. So if you take those microbes and apply them onto your soil, what's going to sustain those extra microbes that you've just applied? They're already microbes.
The food's not there, yeah.
So applying them to the soil is almost a waste of time. But applying them to organic manures, to inoculate that organic manure, and then applying those organic manures, which are inoculated with the beneficial biology onto the soils, means they survive and hang around and have a greater impact for longer in the soils. But it comes back to indigenous microorganisms. Microbes are multiplying every 20 minutes, bacteria roughly every 20 minutes they multiply. So how quickly can they mutate and evolve compared to humans, which take generations, obviously? So if we were to go
it's still generations, it's just a lot quicker generations, isn't it?
But it's if you capture microbes today from a soil, you put it into a lab and you brew it up and you make it into a product. You go back 12 months later, the microbes that you took have now evolved beyond the microbes that you have in the lab, despite the fact that they came from the same place. And that's because microbes are as adaptive as farmers are. I think farmers are probably the most adaptive sort of individuals I know. They're so responsive.
And yet they're always told they don't like change.
Well, nobody likes change. But when they have to, farmers do exceptionally well. They will always do what needs to be done. And they find a way of doing it. Farmers are very resourceful. I've always said that and find that cool.
It's that genetics arms race, isn't it? That if you think about, any form of genetics and keeping up with predators or...
It was the survival of the most adaptive, not fittest.
So
fittest is adaptive.
Do you want to step back? You said it's 2 months, was it, for the process to fermentation to take full effect, is it?
Yeah.
So let's say we've cleaned out after, let's say it's 3 months. We're cleaning out after 3 months. Where do you go from there? What happens then?
So if, generally speaking, winter's 6 months long, the first 3 months of the winter you clean out, you put into a midden or onto a concrete pad in the corner of the farm or even in the corner of a field. Do so, but then cover it with a silage sheet.
Okay.
So you're continuing that fermentation process. Now, obviously, if it's been in there for 3 months...
But you're changing it then from an aerobic to an anaerobic, aren't you?
So in the bedding, think about it, as the straw builds up,
it's already...
The bottom of that deep bedded is anaerobic.
Okay.
So you're taking it out of an anaerobic environment, you're putting it into an aerobic environment temporarily before going back into an anaerobic environment. So that continues the fermentation process.
I'll ask a question. Would an oxygen barrier sheet be a better sheet?
Yeah, probably. So we've looked at it and they approached us and they wanted to do some trials with us. And we said, well, I don't know that there's enough of a benefit for farmers to be spending the money on it. So what I would generally say is, because it's an organic manure, farmers don't like spending money on silage. They're not going to spend much money on organic manures. It's the sort of answer, I think, really. But I always say last year's silage sheet to use on this year's Bokashi heap is perfect. If there's the odd hole in it, it's fine. It's not the end of it. As long as it's predominantly, as long as there's more sheet than holes, you're absolutely fine. So use last year's silage sheet. Don't go spending stupid money on it, because unless you get a really good seal on that sheet, you're still going to get a bit of wind blow up. I opened up one recently with the Bristol and Avon Rivers Trust. We did a little demo on a Dutchy farm. And there was spiders, mushrooms, earthworms growing in underneath. So he'd put it onto a field, he'd covered it, he'd stopped the rain falling on it, so he reduced leaching, reduced his losses, but had the interaction from earthworms, creepy crawlies from the soil that had actually come up into the heap, which was a really nice mix and created a really nice end product. So that's what I would do with the first 3 months worth of your organic manure. The second 3 months of the winter period, just before the cows go out, that period of time, if you don't need to take it out of the shed, leave it in the shed.
Right.
Because again, deep bedded, the bottom of it is anaerobic. You could push it all up into one big heap and cover it in the shed. That's absolutely fine. If you don't want to touch it at all and you just want to put a sheet over it in the shed as it is untouched, also fine, works really well. And then spread it straight from there. If you can take it out of the sheds, into the dung spreader, onto the fields.
No different in how it's handled once you're spreading it.
Once it's been stored either in the shed under a sheet or in the corner of a field under a sheet, treat it just like any other organic.
But it's not leave it. You said leave it. Let's say it's cows go out, it sits there for a month. You haven't sheeted it in the shed.
You'll be amazed how much it's dried out in that time period.
I was going to say, but the anaerobic's already happening. It's still happening.
The anaerobic's happened at the bottom. You'll
Yeah.
have a crust that obviously hasn't fermented on the top.
Yeah.
Not the end of the world. If you're going to apply that onto grazing ground or silage ground, that will be an issue because that crust hasn't broken down.
Yeah.
But if you can apply it onto maize ground that's going to be ploughed in for maize, a bit of a crust isn't an issue. So this is, farmers say, oh, do I have to sheet it? Do I have to sheet it? I'm like, ideally, yes, but there are some that refuse to sheet it and they just know that they're going to get a crust.
Yep.
They're going to have some leaching. They're going to have some losses, but the centre of that heap is going to be great. And they're going to put it onto arable ground where it doesn't matter if there's a few lumps that they have to go and kick around afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. It's being ploughed in or whatever it is, whereas on grazed grass, you don't want that sat on top because it just,
So somebody like Bill Harper's Feeds, would apply 8 tonnes per hectare between cuts of silage from his Bokashi that's made with a sheet on it and won't have any contamination of that organic manure 6 weeks later when he cuts his next cut of silage because it's been broken down enough and taken into the soil quite quickly when it's managed properly. But if it's going onto arable ground and there's a crust, you could argue it doesn't matter quite so much.
I'm 8 tonnes.
Yeah.
With 6 weeks. That is amazing, isn't it?
8 tonnes of organic manure applied after silage.
And then 6
and
weeks
it's
before
disappeared by the time the next. And what we've seen is because it's pre-digested, because the microbes that we're adding are pre-digesting that organic manure. Once it's applied onto the soil, those nutrients are readily available to the next sort of rung up that soil food web, that ecosystem that's going on. Microbes will always be the first thing in. Then you're talking about your protozoa, arthropods, then you've got earthworms all coming in. But if that first process is already done, as soon as it hits the soil, it's available to far bigger animals.
So they're up there and they're grabbing it down. And
Absolutely that.
So really there isn't, apart from maybe spreading those bacteria weekly, there isn't a huge extra workload to doing this, is there? It's not like you see some of these compost piles that are turned weekly or whatever with huge, great machines, etc., etc. I do believe as an organic farmer was doing it as well. But in terms of that, I'm looking at it from the workload, it's not a huge amount. It is really apply it weekly, sheet it, and that's it.
Yeah. No additional equipment needed other than maybe a knapsack sprayer that hasn't got Roundup in.
that's probably a very good comment.
If you put it into a canister that was used yesterday for spraying Roundup, it's probably not the best thing.
No.
But otherwise, and that's the thing. So when I saw the process when I first started, it was quite labour intensive. So you had to use the microbes, you had to apply seashell grit, which was a pH buffer. Then you had to apply a clay mineral, which works as a nutrient binder to further stop leaching. Those things are all great and there's a place for them, but that cost about £18 a tonne to treat. Plus it was labour intensive. Nobody's doing that. Nobody's spending £18 a tonne on their organic manures, which RB209 tells them is worth maybe £10, £15 a tonne. Not happening. Whereas applying the microbes at a cost of less than £1 a tonne, and that's all that's needed to be done other than sheeting.
Yeah, time and sheeting.
Is not unaffordable. And the returns, so the last work we did with Agri, looking at it, one of their farms, we had a treated and untreated. The treated the treated manure, which came out of the same shed, contained £15 more NPK than the untreated.
And how much it cost them per
£1 a tonne.
£1 a tonne. So you're saying 15 to 1
Return.
In
that situation, that was a untreated pile which was taken out of the shed, put into the corner of the field in a heap and left, versus Bokashi made, microbes added, corner of a field, sheeted. Go back 4 months later, in this instance it was 4 months. The longer you leave it, the greater the difference is, obviously.
Yeah.
But after 4 months, it was £15 more in N, P and K value in the Bokashi versus the non-treated.
And that's £15 a tonne.
A tonne. Yeah. So
and a little bit of labour time within that.
there would be, of course, some costs in that. But like I said, it works out at £1 a tonne in cost. If you're using last year's silage sheet, you're mucking out a shed anyway. So that's a cost that's already there. The only difference is you've then got to put the sheet on it, which will take a bit of time and is a bit of a faff. I'm not going to lie. People don't like sheeting a silage clamp, let alone a muck heap in the corner of a field in the middle of winter.
The way you've explained this to me, it kind of answers the questions I have. But why does it feel... It's one of those products that sounds to me, before we've had this conversation today, it's the whole point where we're having this conversation. It's a bit muck and magic. And...
Pun intended.
Well, it wasn't actually, but... but you know what I mean? It's a bit muck and magic. It's, a bit of fairy dust. Whereas when you explain it in the way you've just done it, it seems like there's a lot of evidence there to say that it's not fairy dust, it's not muck and magic. There is real science behind this. Maybe you've already answered the question for your comment about, not being in Farmers Weekly, but why is there not more understanding, more acceptance, more knowledge out there in the general industry about this? There are obviously people that are, and I keep hearing it more in front of me, but it still feels like there's a lot of people who don't know this.
I think you're right. I think that's okay. And I'm, up until Lisa joined Agriton January time, I think it was, I was the only one talking about Bokashi in the UK. I'm one person. I've got a few other things going on. Got an 8-month-old baby, 8 months this weekend. So there's a lot going on. And I've not possibly been the best at standing on top of platforms and talking about it.
And advocating.
Yeah. I hate being thought of as a salesman. I hate it.
Don't take this the wrong way, but you obviously have other people working for you as well.
So that's, So we're a small company, a really small company. When I joined, there was...
Because I know somebody that was trying to tell me about it, that was doing a little bit for you guys.
There are now a growing number. And that's... So we've got... I think the approach I took when I first started was, right, I'm going to go, how can I have the most impact? How can one person have?
Yes.
So I went to the likes of Arla, I went to DEFRA, I went to the people that actually influenced what was going on farm. They weren't interested. No, it was just a flat no. We're not interested at this point. So, okay, the next approach was to go to the bottom and create a bit of a groundswell of interest. And that has grown to the point where when I first started with Bokashi, I knew everybody that made a Bokashi. In fact, I went on farm to help make every Bokashi heap in the first 2 or 3 years. Because I knew that if I didn't do it, and if farmers didn't do it properly, because farmers love to cut a corner, they'd go, hang on a minute, that didn't work. We tried it, it didn't work. Whereas I made sure it did work. And then, okay, we'll do it again next year because it worked. They saw it work. Now, there are people that come up to me and say, oh, we make Bokashi. I say, oh, okay, what's your name? Trying to figure out.
Who are you?
And I must admit, I don't know. So I've gone from knowing everybody to knowing only a fraction of them. And we can see where the Bokashi heaps are made across the country by the people that are buying the microbes. But we've also got people now that I know that are brewing their own microbes that are making Bokashi. Oh, we've made Bokashi. It works really well. Oh, brilliant. What did you... Yeah, we can capture our microbes. So there's a growing number of people that are doing that without me knowing as well. So that's another reason. But also, again, farmers don't like change, and it is a waste product. And this, I think, is this was sort of what I wanted to get to with my Nuffield scholarship, was how do you value something that is considered a waste product? You know, we call it shit and we treat it like it. You know, ultimately, it's a waste product. It's a headache. It's something we have to deal with to get rid of. The number of farmers that say, I leave it in the corner of my field to rot down over the winter months, knowing that they're reducing the volume, so I've got less to spread in the spring.
But it's an incredibly valuable product.
Yeah. So how do you get them to change that mindset? The only thing that's really had any influence was in 2022 when the fertiliser price jumped 300%. All of a sudden, organic manures, instead of being worth £15 a tonne, according to RB209 on NPK values, were worth nearly 50 quid. Well, hang on a minute. I've got 1,000 tonnes at 50 quid a tonne. I'd go and build a shed to put my fertiliser in. Maybe I should be building a shed to put my organic manures in. Plus, then you've got government schemes that have been providing money for dung middens. Poultry manure now that has to be covered because of avian flu issues. So there's a growing number of things that are helping drive people towards Bokashi, but ultimately it's somebody selling some magic microbes, snake oil, and that's the skepticism.
And I suppose because you can't see the bacteria. You could be selling fresh air as far as it goes.
This is the one thing that still blows my mind that I cannot get my head around. Each milliliter of microbes that we sell contains 10 to the power of 7, which is 10 with 7 zeros on the end of it, microbes.
Yeah.
So that's 100 billion.
No, I think that's 10 billion.
10 billion.
Per 10 billion per milliliter of microbes. And you're putting on 2 litres per tonne, which is just enormous. Like the total number. I still can't get my head around how you can get so many things into something so small as a milliliter
you still can't
of liquid.
see them.
And you got to just, and that I think is the issue is chemistry. We can see, you know, you apply lime onto your soils, you can see the pH change, or you can analyse it. It's really easy to do. You don't get that with biology, not yet. We're not. Science hasn't got to that point.
So it can be used on any livestock, so chicken, pig. Yeah. I mean, we're obviously more predominantly dairy, beef we're talking here, but it can be used on anything. Horses, dare I say
it does. So the principles are carbon to nitrogen ratio and then moisture. So it doesn't work in lambing pens, for example, or horse stables because they're very generous with their straw, and understandably so, horses are very precious. Whereas poultry manure, high nitrogen, that's really wet, high nitrogen materials. So you've got to take into account carbon to nitrogen ratio and moisture content. So if you've got stable manure and you've got next door neighbour's got some slurry, mix the two together because you've got some nitrogen, you've got some moisture, you can make a...
And you say it's not just straw, it's sawdust, wood chips, paper, any organic matter.
Yeah.
So that was going to be my next question. We've talked a lot about FYM, and we did mention slurry sort of somewhere in the middle of our conversation. Is there anything we can do with Bokashi and slurry?
Slurry is a shitty product that we can make slightly less shitty, but it's still not it's not a natural product. It's a toxic product by nature. We approached Arla about microbes. Kingshay have done a trial on slurry bugs and a number of different products, and they all showed some benefit. So there was a 20%-ish reduction in ammonia emissions, for example. So you're retaining nitrogen. Brilliant. There was a 20%-ish reduction in crust. So you're reducing the amount of stirring needed. So there were benefits, but they're not as big as a 40% reduction through the use of sulfuric acid, for example.
Yes, but sulfuric acid kills off all our soil biology.
And do you know what the best bit of sulfuric acid is that I still can't get my head around? They did this in the Netherlands. They applied it onto a dairy farm that had slats, and they applied the sulfuric acid onto the concrete slats, and the sulfuric acid eats the calcium in the concrete, and all the cows ended up in the slurry store. So it only works if you've got a earth-bunded or a metal tank slurry store.
And what did the government give funding for?
Acidification. I know.
I know.
There's no joined up thinking.
But 40% reduction is a bigger number than 20%. And that's the quick win, the short term.
I know somebody else that is incredibly anti this whole using sulfuric acid that is coming out of Europe, and it will kill all our soil biology.
Absolutely.
Well, that's same as TSP and fertiliser. Triple
That's
superphosphate
the
will
next
kill
government's
our
problem.
soil biology.
It's the next government's problem. It's not ours.
What about a product that's it's more a cubicle product that is paper, but it has like lime and that added with it? How does that affect?
So lime, I'm not a fan of.
Yep.
Especially not in cubicles, because the way in which lime is constructed, generally
thinking about it, any product that if you're using it in a cubicle, most people put a bedding powder or something on there. How do these sorts of things affect
lime, for example, you can look at, it's been a while since I've done the calculation. I think for a ton of lime, you bog standard calcium carbonate lime that you put into slurry, you lose 440 kilograms of CO2. No, 440 kilograms of carbon, not CO2, carbon, and 220 kilograms of nitrogen. Because of the reaction that takes place, the calcium carbonate, the carbonate pinches a hydrogen from ammonium, NH4, to turn it into ammonia, NH3. Ammonia, obviously gas, goes into the atmosphere. So lime, used on farm, not great for cows' teats, okay as a bedding product in preventing mastitis, but has a huge carbon footprint and will reduce an awful lot of nitrogen. We also then apply a load of lime onto our fields to adjust pH. We use it in the farm to kill biology, prevent mastitis. We put it onto the fields to address pH. It's also having an effect on biology in the fields as well. So I'm not a fan of lime, as you can probably tell. Other bedding products, there's some better than others, is the ultimate truth of it. I grew up, my granddad told me there's 3 things you can do to prevent mastitis. Keep your cupels dry, keep your cupels dry, keep your cupels dry. So then applying something like a liquid biology to it just goes against what I was taught as a kid. And of course, you believe what your granddad says because he's the god. First mentor you have, and you believe everything he says. So I would question why we need a bedding powder on things like cubicles and mattresses, for example. Do you need to put sawdust on mattresses? Does that make any difference to the comfort of the animal?
I would question you're actually providing a food source for the bacteria and actually potentially making it worse. Potentially. That's one of the issues. If there's bad bacteria there, you're giving them something to eat.
I mean, I was going to say, to answer your question, I've always been told that on mattresses, having that medium does make it more comfortable because the mattress is relatively, unlike sand, they can't manipulate a mattress. Whereas if they've got sawdust or something on top, then they've got that medium to.
And that I would, from a human perspective, and of course I'm not a cow. You do the knee test where you go down on your knees onto a cubicle, and whether you put a bit of sawdust on there or not, to me, it doesn't make any difference. But I appreciate that, like you say, there's that settling. You can sort of move a little bit easier with a layer of sawdust on the mattress. But I would argue that, yes, if you're not careful, how many farms have you gone to where the breastboard is too far forward or too far back, and not all of the cows are uniformed, and then some of them got milk leaking onto the cubicles, then others that are pooing onto the cubicles. Next one comes along, lies down, and others are, I think there's a lot of things that farmers can do from a management point of view better without needing to turn to a product. I think the products are probably used to try and cover some of the management failures on farm, which is probably a little bit controversial.
Just about to say, that's a bit of a controversial comment there.
Not to mention any farmers at all, just generally speaking, and I appreciate some won't be. I work for the Wills brothers. Did you ever visit?
Yeah, I did go down for, was it the first 2 sales or something? I remember in 2010, was it the first one, I think?
I go on a lot of dairy farms. They're up there.
It's an amazing cow palace.
Like for animal, the attention to detail, that's why I have a very critical eye when I go onto dairy farms, because I've come from the Wills brothers, where you could literally walk around the sheds in the cubicles or outside the cubicles with your shoes on and still be able to jump in your car at the end of the day and not have to worry about wiping your feet. There are not many farms that can say that. And then you've got the uniformity of the cattle that they've got, everyone is just right size for the cube. It's the next level. So I am highly critical, but it's possibly because I've seen what can be done. Not necessarily saying that they're making any more money or they might be making less and they're having to sell. There's things going on, but who knows what the sort of ins and outs of it are. But I think there's a lot more farmers could do from a management perspective before they start worrying about the products that they're using.
Well, I'm looking at the time because we have been here and I could really keep chatting for quite a while, but I have learned a lot from this. But Andrew, any last words of wisdom?
Keep it simple. Everybody, myself included, wants to make things complicated. And generally it's because they're trying to sell something. And I think if you as a farmer are talking to somebody and you're a bit confused, you generally they sound like they know what they're talking about. It must be right. I'd probably question it. If it doesn't make sense, if it isn't simple, if somebody can't explain something to you in a sentence or two, it's probably not right for you. And don't turn to products first. Look at yourself, look at your management practices. What can you as a farmer do for free to improve things first before you turn to a product? And if you do turn to a product, make sure it's Bokashi. Which, of course, you can make without buying any products.
Sarah.
I was going to say, other than Andrew, you'll never make a salesman speaking like that. However, I think, there's a lot of wisdom in what you've just said. And I think, from a regenerative point of view and just putting my, that regen hat on, that work when farming and nature work in unison, that's when we've got this cracked.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you because I've learned a lot, and that was the whole point of this. The whole point of this podcast really is to learn, and other people just happen to have the chance to listen in on the conversation that I probably otherwise wouldn't get the time of day with some people. But it's been a fantastic hour or more than an hour now talking to you and learning a lot about Bokashi and actually taking away some of that, I suppose, muck and magic idea I had about it in terms of it's actually quite easy to do. There's not in my head, I suppose I was thinking about the turning that people do with composting, and you're not doing that. It is literally apply it, put it in the corner, put a sheet over it, sit and wait, and that's it. And when it's that simple, it's like, oh, okay. As I say, it's why isn't there more being done about this out there when if it's making the benefits that you've said, like, the 15-1 on a recent trial, then it's like, well, that automatically just says, why aren't we doing this? That kind of return on investment is huge. So no, I just like to say thank you. It's been an eye-opener. As I say, I do find the whole regen, and I know some people might find this a bit controversial, a little bit Wild West, and there are people pushing things that to me don't maybe have the science yet behind it. And I suppose I want to see the hard facts. But it's definitely in my eyes a lot more to this, as you say. And I think I thought myself back along and sort of forgotten it that I think, we're at the beginning of maybe biological farming. And as you say, we're only sort of going back to some of the old ways that were, but maybe we have the better understanding of why they were now than what we did in the past.
There's nothing new under the sun.
Not really. No, exactly.
And on that point, you're absolutely right. And I think livestock farmers are regen farmers. They don't have to be labelled it. You talk about regen is focused predominantly at arable farmers, because if you take Gabe's principles, integration of livestock, well, that's a big tick for livestock farmers. Diversity, well, they've always got a grass lay in there. So again, diversity's there. They're doing a lot of the things that makes regen farmers, but they're just called farmers. Why can't we all be called farmers again? Dairy farmer, arable farmer, mixed farmer.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
And just using what nature intended us to use.
100%.
So really, other than that, I'd just like to say thank you very much for your time. But otherwise, it's a goodbye from me.
Cheery bye from me.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Tune the Cud podcast for the UK dairy industry, brought to you from the southwest of England and listened to around the world. Now for the really boring bit, I'm afraid, the legal disclaimer. The information provided during this podcast has been prepared for general information purposes only and does not constitute advice. The information must not be relied upon for any purpose, and no representation or warranty is given to its accuracy, completeness, or otherwise. Any reference to other organisations, businesses, or products during this podcast are not endorsements or recommendations of Chewing the Cud Limited. The views of Andrew Jones are personal and may not be the views of Chewing the Cud Limited, and the views of Sarah Bolt are personal and may not be the views of Kingshay Farming and Conservation Limited and any affiliated companies. For more information on the podcast and details of services offered by Chewing the Cud Limited, visit www.chewingthecud.com. Thank you and goodbye.